It's great to be in Australia. It's my very first time ever in my life being in Australia. And aside from the 15-hour lag, I find it so warm, inviting, just like being in Canada. That's where I'm from, Ottawa, Canada. We've been on a tight schedule and meeting all kinds of people. And I was surprised that even though the time shift is great, the similarities are great. We're both huge countries. And we're about 25, 30 million people. I'm also impressed at how similar we are, but you guys are clearly, you're clearly much more dedicated than designers in Canada, because I'm amazed that all of you are willing to get up at the middle of the night to hear me speak. So let's get into it. He said I'm going to talk about doing good, and we live in a remarkable time. This is a very special time right here, right now, because although we've been talking about print and the internet and new media in the future, as Nicholas Negroponte from MIT tells us, for the majority of the people on the planet, the internet remains a rumor today. Most humans don't have never seen, have never touched, felt, looked, tasted the internet. And yet, in the next 10 years, that's going to change. In the next 10 years from today, the majority of human beings will have engaged with this remarkable time. Now, we talk about, how many of you are familiar with the idea of the digital divide? Have you heard this before, digital divide? We've got the rich and the poor, and those who have the technology, the rich can get richer and the poor can get poorer. And there's two potential outcomes over the next 10 years, and we have a huge power on deciding what's going to happen. Because we can either see the next 10 years being a place where when people first get the internet, that they're going to be a part of something wonderful, that they're going to have access to knowledge and communications and medical ideas, conflict resolution, democracy, or it can just be one more way we can convince huge populations that they need to consume more stuff to belong as part of the world culture. A friend of mine, Professor Brook from Salzburg, Austria, he describes the space we've been in as 4 screens. He talks about the first screen being the movie screen. A group of us together, a community like this, get together and have an experience where information is sent to us. And then the second screen was where that screen moved into our homes, into our private spaces, and we have an interaction which is somewhat interactive, but really not very much. We can choose channels. And that prominence of television has had a huge effect on us. Now, we're now then moved into the space, just in the last 15 years, where the third screen, the interactive computer, has allowed us to create our own experiences. However, the place where most of the world's population is going to get the internet for the first time is on this tiny screen, the fourth screen. I'd like you to imagine a moment that you live in Ghana, and your daughter is ill. Not deathly ill, but pretty ill, coughing up all night. You're not sure what's wrong. You rush to a pharmacy in the middle of the night, and you have to buy some medicine. The problem is that in Ghana, 20% of the drugs are fraudulent. They're not real. You don't know what's in them. So what do? Do you buy the drugs or not? You could do more good than harm. You're going to give some mystery stuff to your daughter. That's the reality for people in Ghana today. But it's shifting, because this year, this remarkable group created an application which runs on the cell phone. And this application, called M-Pedigree, has arranged with the drug companies where they put a unique numeric string on each bottle of pharmaceuticals. And all you do is you pull out your cell phone, you send an SMS to a certain address with that number, and it instantly tells you if the drugs are legitimate. It's a web-based application. It's got no color. It's got no fancy typography. It's got no great mission statement. It simply works in 160 characters. It saves lives. It saves an economy. And we have the opportunity to decide whether we will simply do good design or whether we're going to do good. Because designers have never had as much power as we had today. You know, we live in a time where we can send messages and create ideas, and we can send them over vast distances at such a low cost to larger and larger populations. And we can choose which messages we're going to do that with. When I was in Africa, I met this child with a Camel cigarette bag, and it concerns me that that's the message he's getting. This girl who's in Petra, who's holding my traveling companion, Spice, she lives in Petra. Do you know Petra? It's in Jordan. It's like the eighth wonder of the world, a whole city carved out of rock by graphic designers working on a large scale a few thousand years ago. The thing is that she lives in a town just outside of Petra, and this is the largest sign in that town. Superior American taste. That's the message that she's grown up with. Now, as I travel through the Middle East, I found a lot of examples of cases where people are being said, we have to look and feel and taste and smell and smoke like these good European, Canadian, Australian kind of looking good people if you're going to really matter in this world. And yet my own daughter, this is my daughter, she's just been accepted for design school in Montreal. I'm so proud. It's not my idea. Still proud. She's never seen a cigarette billboard. Because in Canada, as in Australia, we recognize the value that it takes more than parents to raise children. It takes a whole society that recognizes the power of messaging. And indeed, as she grows, as she ages, I hope she'll make great decisions about how to use tobacco or not. I also think she'll move into an age where there's less focus on the Michael Jackson funerals and the headlines of the day, and more focus on the things that are happening every day on our planet. This is a time of unlimited hope. We've never had much more power. We've never had so much possibility, but at the same time, things have never seemed quite so fragile. And every one of these major stories is one that designers have a role to play. So we can decide our lives are just about creating great design, or we can decide to do good. And that's what I'm here to encourage you to do. To not just do good design, but to do good. This is the most influential piece of design I think I've experienced in my life. Do you recognize it? Does anyone recognize it's from Far From Home? It's the ballot that allowed George Bush to beat Al Gore in that very famous election back in 2000 in Florida, where 3,000 votes separated these two presidential candidates. And we don't tend to think about it as design. We think of design as all the glamorous, amazing, award-winning projects that are all over the city this week. And yet this is a horribly failed piece of information design. You see, the way it worked was, way up at the top there, if you wanted to vote for George Bush, you had to kind of poke a rod into that first hole, knock out a little piece of cardboard. And you have to understand the Americans, when they vote for everyone from the president to the senator to the governor all the way down to the janitor for the local school all at once. So you rush into that voting booth, you're moving real quick because you got a lot of work to do. And if you wanted to vote for Al Gore, the Democratic Party, you poked in that second hole, the third hole. You poked in the third hole, because if you poked in the second hole, you had inadvertently voted for Pat Buchanan, who's a radical right-wing fundamentalist, way over there on the next page. And it happened that in Palm Beach County, 50,000 blacks and Jews voted for Pat Buchanan. And even Pat himself said, that doesn't make any sense to me. And certainly 50,000 was enough to turn the election. It was enough to create a war in Iraq. It was enough to stop the United States from signing the Kyoto Accord. It was enough to stop condoms and AIDS drugs being sent out across Africa. And when we see the power of design then, just to be fair, by the way, because I'm obviously kind of maybe probably a little left wing. In 2004, George Bush again was running against John Kerry. Cuts both ways. In this ballot, do you think after 4 years after such a disaster, the Americans will learn to design a better ballot? No. Top of here, you wanted to vote for John Kerry, for the Democrats. You had to mark a little mark, and the color there is mine. There was no color up there. So you had to mark a mark in the 6 box and take your pen and rub that out. If you wanted to vote for George Bush, way down at the bottom of the list, and his pal Dick Cheney, you had to fill in the 4, which is not right next to the arrow, but way up there at the top of the page. Absolutely bizarre. Fortunately, the AIGA, which is the American version of AGDA, has been working on ballot reform. The point I'm trying to make is that design isn't just about the aesthetic. It isn't about just delighting each other. It isn't about creating remarkable experiences. It's life and death. I did some research and I discovered the largest source of accidental death in Melbourne is traffic accidents. Is that a design problem we can solve? I think so. This is a shot of a standard traffic light scene at night. Took the shots in Brisbane. This is the same shots for how they're seen by someone who's completely colorblind. And I guess if you kind of squint, you can see that the light is a little higher, a little lower at night. But it's a little hard to see. Now, in Canada, we're testing a new kind of traffic light. And these were developed for colorblind people. The way this works is the red is a square rather than a circle. And there's two of them rather than one of them. And they're far apart so you can see the pattern. So we now have color as a secondary cue. We also have the shape and the frequency, all of these different cues to help someone see that traffic light and know what to do when they get there. And just as with so much design for accessibility, when we design for the extremes, we find everyone benefits. Everyone enjoys the new traffic lights, not just someone who is colorblind. It helps someone who's distracted. Now here's a more extreme case. This girl is wearing a piece of equipment which is designed for quadriplegics to navigate the internet. She can, by blowing air into that tube or puffing, sipping and puffing air through the tube, as well as moving her neck, she can move and click a mouse pointer on the screen, even though one doesn't have any use of any of your muscles for below your neck. So, and indeed, information technology has made it possible for designers to give access to the world to millions of people over the last 40 years that didn't have access before, whether it's motorized wheelchairs or it's internet access, because documents that are converted from text into HTML now can be streamed to all kinds of technologies. And indeed, we tend to think about when we take care of people with accessibility issues and disabilities and difficulties, we think we're doing the right thing. We're not leaving anyone behind. Maybe there's 1 or 2% of people who are blind or deaf, and we got to take care of them too. But in fact, it affects a lot more people than that, because I think we underestimate how many people actually have functional difficulties which make it difficult for them to always work with the perfect interface. In fact, I'd like to do an experiment with you right now, if you're willing. Are you willing? So you into something? Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do, okay? I don't want to embarrass anyone. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list off a number of difficulties, of disabilities. And if you have one of them, at the end, after I've listed, I'm going to ask you to stand up so no one will know what you have. Okay? I've got 2 of the things I'm going to list off. Maybe you can figure out what they are. So, if you have a hearing impairment, if you're blind, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're colorblind to any degree, if you have a learning disability, if you have ADD, if you're having trouble finding it easy to keep listening to what I'm saying, if you've ever had an arm in a cast for more than 3 days, if you're ever on the bus trying to use your cell phone while holding groceries in one arm, if you have trouble falling asleep at night, any of these things, just stand up, please, right now, if you don't mind. Let's see how, oh my goodness. No, holy moly, I wasn't really expecting that. Okay, and if you're planning on living past the age of 50, could you stand up too, because your eyesight's probably going to dim out at a certain point. So stand up a little bit, okay? So what do I do, designer friends of mine? I'd like you to look left and look right and say, when you're designing products, interfaces for people with disabilities and difficulties, this is the audience you're designing for. Is that what you expected? Please, have to take your seat. Thank you very much. Look, the most known commercial brand in the world is Coke. And certainly, you know, if you ask a non-designer, what do you think of the Coke logo? They tend to go, oh, Coke logo, wow, what a great logo. It's a horrible logo. I don't know about here in Australia, but in Canada, we only use typefaces like that for really cruddy wedding invitations with fake thermography. So clearly it's not the typography or the brand promise or the benefit statement. There's nothing in there. It's about that wonderful thing that humans love, the comfort of a repeated, consistent message. And that's at the core of brand. And Coke are masters of this. They invented these 2-meter-high backlit billboards that are littering my hometown now. See them all over the world, often in front of stores that sell the same product. I know a guy at Coke who explains to me that most of these things lose money. In fact, the idea is, if I travel around my own city now, someone came along and convinced the city council that they'd put up these free billboards that have a park bench attached to them, and these billboards they're supposed to be recycling bins. They're this wide and this tall, and if you look at them sideways, they're about this thin. And the city was so proud that now they had a commitment to recycling, but meanwhile, the visual space was eaten. And I'm impressed when I went all the way to Africa, and we're doing mountain trekking there, and we're climbing up we're up 3,500 meters above the planet's surface, and there's this last little outpost where you can buy something to drink. And I'm amazed that it took us 3 days to get up there, but some very deft guide has run up the mountain first, put some Coca-Cola there, just so I always have that pause that refreshes within reach. It is darned impressive. And it was even more impressive as we moved through the villages on the highways of Africa, and I found the hospitals and the orphanages and the schools all had Coca-Cola branding. But it's kind of creepy, too, because this is the official signage for these facilities. This is the official signage markers between major cities. And just to make clear that Arusha is the second largest city in Tanzania, who has as many people as all of Australia. And these are the official concrete markers between the cities. When I got to Zanzibar, wonderful Casablanca-esque Zanzibar, I was horrified to find that every street corner now had Coca-Cola signs. See, somewhere in the 90s, while Tanzania was dealing with malaria and insurrection, and Coca-Cola company came along and said, hey, you guys got problems politically? No problem. We'll take care of all your signage in the meanwhile. And the government embraced that. And it's brilliant branding. It's fantastic strategy. But there's a problem, and the problem is, and on the streets of Tanzania, the cost of a Coca-Cola is about the same cost as a malaria pill. And 1 million children died in Africa just this past 12 months of malaria. And so when we choose what messages we're going to share with the world, I think we need to be a little more cautious. Perhaps there's a way that the Coca-Cola's infrastructure can be used to share something more powerful than caffeinated sugar water. And this is my challenge to you. Because as we get involved in an increasingly global community, we know that what insulates us against the downside of globalization is the principles that we carry in our professionalism. What will hold our local culture together is how it's manifested. In a world where the very alphabet we learn is being owned by others, where... Can you name that typeface? You know, I know there's no cigarette advertising allowed in Australia, right? Since the mid-90s, which is fantastic. This is an ad, kind of. There's no product. There's no benefit statement. You know the campaign, though. And indeed, Naomi Klein has claimed that logos have become their own alphabet. Our children can speak this language. I was in Jordan, and I showed this to a group of 15-year-olds, and they were able to get almost every one of those logos all within a minute. I'm losing your attention. You want to identify? Can you recognize all these all the way from Australia? Coke, yeah. After the Apple? Oh, it's just too easy. CBS. We got them all. Next to the Volkswagen, it's Qantas. That's a tough one. Xerox. See that big, what's the next one? FedEx? Wait a moment. Wait. That's not FedEx. That's just the letters FE set in Futura. Wait a minute. Does this mean that every time you're reading a book and you come across an FE, your mind's going, how do I perfectly get the shipment overnight? Every time you see the word ferret legging, do you do ferret legging here? Oh, you don't want to know about ferret legging. Every time you see a word that starts with FE, you're thinking about FedEx, and so are your children. And I think that's a problem. Yeah, you can get them all. I know you can get them all. The challenge then is, with all this power we have as designers, what are we going to do with it? What's the legacy we want to leave? The American car, our American car industry is almost non-existent. I'm not sure by the time we get back it'll still be there. Because the Americans got caught up in this idea that they could sell a fantasy that in the United States there's endless roads where you can drive your toy car. There's no traffic at all. And in Europe, the horrible, horrific advertising to make the point of a tool, a car, becomes a style object. Meanwhile, the Japanese, cleverly using an American idea of continuous improvement, figured out how to reinvent the car. They went in a 15-year period from creating cars that we would just point and laugh at, like, oh, driving a Honda lawnmower there, to cars that are now the number one choice. In the United States today, the Camry is the number one family car. And Americans pay $3,500 more for that car than the American counterpart. So that means that we live in an age where Americans have learned the value of better design, and they're willing to invest in it. So in a world where we're told we have to drive down price, companies like Toyota or Apple are showing that people appreciate good design. And indeed, the awareness of good design has changed how we see things. Now, sometimes there is no competition for a product in terms of direct competition, but for cigarettes, the competition is public education. I've been to over 20 countries trying to encourage designers and design students to consider carefully what they do with the time they have available. And we've seen a transformation of how things are sold, because as the population gets more clever about how they deal with advertising, the audience gets more sophisticated, the advertisers get more sophisticated. So back in the 70s, this is how bottled water was being sold, with a clever slogan, H2O, H2 water, very sharp. But in a time when water is scarce, sex is being used to sell water. Something we have so much of. We have more fresh water in Canada than any other country in the world, and yet we foolishly are bringing water in all the way from Europe. And we're sending our water to Europe. It's crazy. We're paying more for water than we do for petrol. And in fact, I'd like to have 3 cheers for the village of Bundadoon. You know Bundadoon? Southwest of Sydney? They just banned bottled water altogether, July 9th. All 400 of them. But it's a start. They voted 398 to 2, ban bottled water. And you see, the thing is that we're talking about design of the future. And when I show you that advertisement of that teenager making love to that bottle, I like to think that 50 years from now, that would be considered totally unacceptable. Because our young girls deserve a better break than to have to be told that that's what their bodies are about. So I look back at this. This is an ad from 55 years ago that was run in the largest magazine in the United States, Life magazine. And it's selling coffee. It says, if your husband ever finds out you're not store testing for fresher coffee, he's going to beat the crap out of you. It's a very disturbing idea. But in 1952, it was considered humor. And I wonder to what degree in 1952 this was a reflection of the society. Because we say, oh yeah, but in 1952 people were beating their wives all the time, and that's just the way it was. I'm not so sure. I wonder to what degree advertising like this was telling men in 1952 in the United States that it was okay to beat your wife. It was a good thing to beat your wife. But that's what men do. We have to be so careful because we have so much power. We have to use it with grace. And the idea of using women to sell stuff, using sex to sell stuff, it's not a new idea, but it's something that needs to be checked. And indeed, in the early 90s, it seemed that a certain amount of feminism had pushed this stuff away, but it swung right back. And so my daughter grows up in a world where this type of perception, this god-awful way of trying to sell stuff that should be either exist or exist in a different way, cannot be fixed by doing the same thing to men. This is a billboard in Beirut selling a cigarette, and if you don't know French, the slogan is "Liberté toujours," always free. And the sad thing, they've even branded his body with the shackles of this addiction. Here we're selling. What are we selling here? We're selling feminine hygiene products, but it's about this guy with the security. But there's good news, because we live in this remarkable time. Business has noticed that it's good to check out-of-control advertising. Governments have realized that it's okay to put warnings on cigarette packages. I'm very proud of this. One of my biggest clients is Health Canada. And we Canadians were the first ones to come up with this great idea of putting right on the package the warnings about what to do. But the Australians have bettered us, because I noticed the cigarette boxes here, when you turn them over, there's a full package bit on the back, and now we're working on other parts of this. So this idea has moved around the world, that unbridled greed is not necessarily a good business plan for the world, that there's not a one single bottom line, but there's a triple bottom line that we need to take care of. And indeed, in a tenement housing project in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, I was so proud to find this spoof ad from Adbusters, a Vancouver magazine, on a door. Our business world has popped up and recognized the value of design. I just can't imagine that even 10 years ago there would be a cover article about logos. ROB, Report on Business, this is the largest business magazine in Canada. And this is Business Week from Europe. And they're all featuring design, because now the balance sheets of the world's largest corporations have brand equity as a line item. And indeed, we're finding ways of saying that design isn't just about clever emphasis. It's not just about creating intrigue. In Canada, we created the graphic designers of Canada created a new type of exhibit where we have a competition where you win the competition by how much social impact you've had in your local population, rather than how much impact you've had in terms of helping someone make money. And the thing is, we're professionals. And a few thousand years ago, the doctors got together and came up with a Hippocratic Oath. They decided that it was important that they have a standard that was higher than what society expected of them. And we've seen in the last few years how bankers and financiers and accountants, these are industries where their behavior fell below the standard. And society came after them like dogs, as it should be. We designers have to set a higher bar for ourselves. It's true that some doctors go for the cosmetic surgery, and perhaps there was a time when a doctor would shake you down for every penny you had for 5 more minutes of life, but we know that 99% of doctors, if they're driving down the highway and there's an overturned vehicle, they're not going to worry about insurance liability. They're just going to jump out, pull over, jump out of the car, and do whatever they can to save lives. Because being a professional is not something we do from 9 to 5. It's something we do 24/7. And we have to agree on a minimum standard. Now, in Canada, we did something that was exciting. We developed a code of ethics for our design profession, which set a minimum standard. And most professionals have some type of code of ethics to make sure you show up for jury duty. But we decided to include a commitment to society, to the environment. And there's other countries around the world have done similar things. And the work we've done in Ecograta internationally, in Canada, it's found its way into the standards of practice in the AIGA in the United States. It's now being used as a sample for 600,000 Chinese design students. Can you imagine? Just this year, the Graphic Designers of Canada has adopted a new level of sustainability practice, a charter for minimum behavior for designers. And I know that here in Australia, there is not a formal code of professional conduct, a minimum standard in the design professions. And I'd love to see that change. I'm wondering how many of you would be willing to back the idea that we have a minimum standard for designers in Australia that says we have to take care of the environment, we have to take care of society. I really appreciate you giving me so much time. I know it's almost lunch, and I won't take much more of your time. But I do want to compel you to this, because I know I'm sure that I've entertained you to some degree today. But I know that for some of you, this isn't just a matter of entertainment. For some of you, I hope you to move towards a space, or perhaps you're already almost at that space. I'd like you to make a commitment to me today, if you're willing. And this is what I want to ask of you. I'm asking you to make a pledge, and this is the pledge. The pledge is to spend at least 10% of your professional time doing good. Not just doing good design, but doing good. So let's say you had a 40-hour work week. Ha, ha, ha. That would be 4 hours a week. So I'm asking you to spend at least 4 hours a week doing good. I'm not saying pro bono. I'm saying you can get paid. You can just find clients or employers that are doing good for the world, that are creating a more social just world. We figure there are over 1.5 million designers in the world today. Imagine 4 hours a week times 1.5 million. That gives us 6 million hours of creative energy in every aspect of society, ready to be unrolled, unfurled to create a better society. Is that something we're willing to commit to? The key is that I'm so excited about where this is all going, and I'm confident that if we can just decide not just to do good design, but to do good, we can create the best planet this planet has ever known. So let's do that. Thank you so much.